Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. We're grateful to have you joining us, and we're super excited to have Karen McMahon joining us from New York. So, Karen, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Vicki, really excited to chat with you today.
Well, we're thrilled that you're with us and excited to hear your story. But before we jump in, I just want to give the audience a little bit of context. Divorce has definitely been on the rise for many years now. And Karen is a high conflict divorce strategist and founder of Journey Beyond Divorce. And we're going to have some exciting conversations today. But Karen has a very unique approach to the challenges and complexities of breakup, and divorce invites listeners to courageously examine what behaviors, beliefs, and trauma that we all bring to relationships, and how did it not serve that situation. And so, you have your own experiences with divorce, and I'm not going to go into too much on that because I want to make sure that our audience has a chance to hear it from you live. But really, your expertise is about how to navigate that foreign land and ways to build confidence and see the possibilities at the end of it. And so thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled to have you and excited to jump in and have some conversation.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's do it. So Karen, maybe let's just start out with, there's lots of life's up and downs, and whether it's health, loss, whether it be death or divorce. And divorce certainly is no exception to having a severe impact on us. But maybe share your own personal journey just to kick us off as to how you even, became this strategist.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is I've gone through divorce twice. I was a child. I was a teenager when my parents got divorced. And my mom was a bit of a hot mess, and my dad was pretty checked out. And way back then, the kids just needed to shut up and be quiet because the parents were having a hard time. So that's what I came from. And of course, then never wanted to get divorced. I left home at 19. I was on my own for like a dozen plus years. So I was in my mid 30s when I met my Prince Charming, and I figured, I'm mature. I've been living for a while. I've got this. This is lifelong. And it wasn't. And within the first 7 years, everything was crumbling. So I would say that I emerged from a pretty dysfunctional family. So I had a rather large luggage of my own filled with issues. And he had his own. And so we had a pretty high conflict. There was a lot of contention. My kids were very young when I finally decided to leave after marriage counseling and retreats and what have you. They were still like 4 and 6 when I told them.
Oh, wow. Very young.
So one of the things when you're entering a high conflict divorce is you're also entering high conflict co-parenting. And so we had many, many years of co-parenting afterwards. But my divorce took 3.5 years. There was no money to split up. It was really, what I say to people is, a divorce is going to move as quickly as the slowest moving person. And my spouse was angry and offended that I would consider leaving him. And he needed 3.5 years to be ready to negotiate a settlement.
Yeah. Wow. That's a long time. And very challenging, especially as you're trying to raise kids to not have the baggage that you had yourself as you brought into it, right? And I'm sure he had his own baggage that he brought into it. So what happens when you begin to actually heal through these experiences? And what are some of those belief systems that are ingrained in us that, prevent us from actually seeing what we're contributing to the situation?
Yeah, and those are two really big questions. So I'm on the healing right now. I'm going to say that it is so vitally important that people who are entering divorce educate themselves on the grieving process and really not just understand it intellectually, but find the right support to come alongside you, because people, the saying is, death and divorce are two of the hardest transitions. And most of my clients would say divorce goes above death because there are so many little deaths, right? So it's the death of a dream. Um, and then, for me, I loved my in-laws. I immediately lost my in-laws. You're bound to lose some of your friends, either because they choose the other person or they're so awkward and uncomfortable. They just don't have anything to do with either of you. You're losing your financial status, right? Everybody's finances are going down. You're losing time with the kids. So in healing, there's what you brought to the table, and the healing from, and I'm going to say just up front, that's family of origin issues that we bring into our marriage. So there's a lot of healing. So on the healing front, understand, and even if you think you've been ruminating for years and you're done with this individual, trust me, grief isn't done. And so there will be the range of, right, denial, depression, anger, bargaining, acceptance, that you are going to swing back and forth for a while. And it's really valuable to have somebody who understands that process, who can really help you're processing and releasing,
Yeah.
understanding, processing, and releasing. And so that's vital. And then to your other question, it is so fascinating. And I've been doing this for 14 years now. When clients slow down and start noticing their behaviors in their marriage that are so similar to their family of origin,
Mm.
that I grew up in a household where mom was a rageaholic, dad was an alcoholic. I became the rageaholic. My ex had a different substance of choice, but it was so I could look at a glimpse of my marriage when it started falling apart, and it didn't look all that different from the
Wow.
house that I grew
Yeah.
up in. And so we may grow up with a lot of conflict and then become conflict oriented or conflict avoidant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, I had a client who said, I don't have any conflict energy. And I was like, oh, girlfriend,
Ooh.
you have so much conflict energy. You stuff it and it's inside. You don't explode. But let's talk about your implosions and what that looks like and the impact that has on you, on the kids, on your health. So there's conflict. And then especially for those of us who have found ourselves in high conflict. So you're married, and I can define it to somebody who I would refer to as a high conflict personality. Today, everyone wants to call everyone a narcissist, but it's much more nuanced than that. And so if you're attracted to that kind of a personality, chances are you've developed people pleasing, codependence, conflict avoidance. Like, we all kind of have this similar bucket of you swallow your voice, you overdo, you do 200%, and then you feel angry and bitter and the martyr. Like, we all hear the stories. If you're nodding as you're listening,
Yes.
the stories, we're all very similar. And I feel very comfortable saying this because I truly feel after all these years that I'm a recovering codependent, a recovering people pleaser, a recovering perfectionist. I've been there, and I still see little signs of it that I can still work on.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, so a number of things that you talked about there, like, even if I go back to the grief, and so true. And I have said those words myself, that death would have been easier than navigating the divorce, right? Because you're always seeing that person. And when you have children, of course, you are co-parenting, and then when children grow up and they get married and they have kids, and so there's still
It's a
this.
lifelong, like, you're not getting rid of the person, right? Like, so if you're divorcing somebody and there are no children, you can kind of say good riddance,
Yes.
you know, and that can be the end of it. But when you've got children, this is it. Unless your children completely cut off that person, you're going to have some kind of a relationship with them, which is one of the things we talk about, how it's so important to do your work so that you don't feel like I have to be miserable the rest of my life because this person is so difficult to be in relationship with. It doesn't have to be that way.
That's right. That's right. And so that goes into the second part of that with what are the belief systems? What are you bringing in? And, you know, I'll take myself as an example. When my divorce first happened, I was not taking responsibility for my part, right? Because it was, oh my gosh, you've done this to me, to us, to our family. But as you step back and start to do that work that you're talking about and do that internal deep dive as to what was I contributing to that conflict, right? And I remember it's because we had our oldest child, we had them in therapy with a psychologist who did play therapy. And it was very fascinating what she shared. She said, oh, there's two kinds of war. There's a hot war and there's a cold war. And she said, you guys have a cold war because we didn't argue, we didn't fight. There was no screaming, there was no, right? And to your point, when you look back and think about all the, like I came from a parent that was, one was very calm and one was very in your face, high conflict, right? But he came from a situation where there was no conversations, right? And then it just happens. And so when you start taking a deeper look at what do I need to work on for myself, that's really, I think, when we can start to become more of who we are meant to be and taking that ownership. To your point, like if I'm being a people pleaser, what does that mean? How does that play out? Where does it play out in my life?
Absolutely. And I would say one of the most valuable things, it's almost like a fringe benefit of keeping the focus on yourself and working on yourself is going through divorce has to be one of the most disempowering
Oh, yeah.
processes. You have no control over your soon to be ex, who you clearly can't negotiate with or reconcile with. The court systems are very broken. Attorneys are human beings. And so, I can't tell you how many people are frustrated that they don't hear back. They don't have, there was so many, the kids could have their own stuff going on, the in-laws, the friends. So here you've got so much going on that you have no control over. And that causes us to be severely reactive
Yeah, of
and
course.
triggered. And yet, to your point, if I focus all of my energy on the one thing I have complete control over, which is me, my attitude, my behavior, number one, I'm going to feel more empowered. Number two, I am going to be healing and refining parts of me while I go through this really complex process. And when I do that, I then get to pay it forward to my children. So, from my perspective, there's no reason to not keep the focus on yourself. It has so many brilliant rewards to it. And that piece of it, feeling empowered going through the divorce is right at the center of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's well said. Well said. So how does one begin that healing process? Like you had your way, I had my way, but what would you share with the audience if you're somebody who's contemplating or have just, started the journey of divorce? How do they begin to go forward?
Right. It's a great question. So, when I think about the very first thing somebody needs, there are two things that come to mind. One is your spouse is squatting between your ears, and
Mm.
and they haven't they have no authority to do that. We've given up the authority, right? And so over the course of years or decades, you begin, I can't tell you how often I'll meet a new client and I'll ask them a question and they'll say, well, my wife thinks, well, my husband says. And I'm like, notice what you're doing. You have yet to tell me what you think, but you're already telling me what they think. And the reason that happens is we literally, and this was completely me, everything that happened, my first thought was, how is he going to react to it? What is he going to say about it? What do I have to do? Right? This is the trying to control. What do I have to do so that I can somehow calm the storm that I see coming? So if I twist myself into enough of a pretzel, maybe I can avoid the blow up. And so I have a free gift. that's followed by a little mini course that's called Reclaim Your Mind, Evict Your Spouse from Your Mental Space. And we literally take you through the eviction process of how is it you got here, and what are the thoughts that you're having that are keeping you stuck in their view and their perspective, and how can you begin to liberate. You can't go through this process and make these complex long-term decisions without having full access to your mind. You need to evict them, you need to sweep it clean, you need to paint the walls, you need to redecorate your mental space with your beliefs, your priorities, your values, so that you can then go through this process in a really discerning way.
Yeah. And not easy what you're saying, because the heart is involved as much as the mind is involved, right? And so it's that how to, how to really tap into both and get some harmony between the two, because we're human beings, and some of us live more here, some of us live more from a heart space, and so it's how to balance that, right? And but you're so right what you're saying, because you're giving away all of your power, your innate power, when we allow that to continue.
And I would even take it one step further, because so many people come to me and they're like, how do I get out of fear? How do I get out of guilt? How do I get out of shame? And they want to change the feeling,
Yeah,
which makes sense, right? Like,
of
can I get
course.
out of all these yucky feelings? You can't start with the feeling. You always have to start with the thought, because the thought is hardwired into the emotion. And so, for instance, if you're thinking, I can't believe I have to do this. I'm going to destroy my children. I am going to devastate them for the rest of their life. You're going to walk around with a lot of guilt and shame. And so you
Mm,
want to just poke around at that perspective. So you're saying, what can they do? I would say, start listing your stories. List all of your perspectives. He's going to crush me, or she's going to steal the children and I'm never going to see them, or whatever your story is. Write down all of your fear stories and put them in the order of priority, and then start, because your emotion starts with the story. And if you can go, well, is that true? And someone once said to me, I am going to spend the rest of my life poor and in a basement apartment. I was running in-person groups, and I said, and so it shall be.
yeah. Oh, wow, that's
And
powerful.
that's all I said.
Yeah,
And the
'cause your thoughts
whole
are
room
powerful.
got really quiet. And I was like, how would you like to rewrite that narrative?
Yeah.
And she wrote to me years later, and she's like, oh my God, I met a guy. I have a beautiful home. But if whatever we focus on is what's going to grow. And so that mindset piece is critical, and it will absolutely begin to touch on all of those emotions that are so uncomfortable.
Yeah. So you've highlighted a number of things there. So there's a tremendous amount of complexity when you are going through this journey of divorce, right? You've got the emotional, you have the mental, you have the financial.
Yes.
Sometimes there can be physical. Like I myself, I experienced a lot of health issues, which were linked but not linked. I mean, just the stress of,
Oh, forget about it. The
right?
stress is actually, I just had someone who went through a second cancer scare and bout. And when she got divorced, she said, I truly believe my cancer is now behind me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how it's all connected,
Yes.
right? And when you realize that I think that is where the healing starts, right? Because then you start to look at each aspect of who you are, and how do I work on these different components of who I am, and how is it impacting me? To your point, you talked about the children. So what's the life that you want your kids to have? And there's great lessons for them to learn, right? That resiliency, being authentic, and being able to navigate these. There's also a lot of career aspects that are impacted when you're going through
Huge.
situations like this. Yeah.
And in fact, I will say that so many of my clients who would have found that once they got clear on the dynamic between them and their spouse and what they were bringing to the table, they'd be like, oh my God, my boss is very much like my spouse, or
Mm.
or that other person that I have that person at church, or whatever it may be. And so when we behave a certain way, we magnetically attract a certain type of personality. And so, to your point, I've had clients break up with friends, change jobs, because they were basically, it was like getting rid of the snakeskin. They were clearing all of these things that didn't serve them, because as they changed the root of who they were and how they navigated the world, they really wanted to blossom into healthiness on all fronts. And the other thing I want to say is, there are so many skills, and we can't, we'll barely touch on all of this. But the other first thing, if reclaiming your mind is too deep of a dive, if it's too heavy of a lift, which it will be for some people, the other early stage step that you can take is to learn boundaries, learn how to articulate a boundary, to not use a boundary as a weapon. It's more like a garden gate where you can choose when to open it and when to close it. And the most important thing about boundaries is people don't know how to uphold them. So again, they're trying to control the other person. I told you to stop speaking to me that way. So you say it louder and you say it more often. It doesn't change anything. You have to change your behavior to uphold the boundary. And so that's a fabulous skill. And that builds confidence and comfort, simply because you learn how to protect yourself a little bit more.
Yeah. So Karen, that's a great point. So maybe just elaborate on that. If because that one comes up a lot, whether it's through divorce, through career. So how would you coach someone on ensuring that they are um, staying true to those boundaries? Like you've said it louder, it didn't work. You say it more often, it's not working. What would you advise someone to do, especially if they are struggling to honor their own boundaries?
Absolutely. So I think that I do a 5-day boundary boot camp, because if you haven't grown up with boundaries, which many of us in these
Yeah.
complex divorces, there's a reason we're in them. And so it's kind of like playing the violin. I don't know how to play the violin. I was never raised with music, right? So understanding that boundaries are like super healthy and needed in every healthy relationship, and that they're your responsibility. And so I'll use my self as an example. My spouse had major anger management issues, and he had a very nasty bile mouth, like so nasty. And so I used to do that. I'd yell louder. I'd say it more often. Stop! You can't talk to me that way. Yeah, he can, and he did. And so the upholding of a boundary is to say, what's my boundary? Is my boundary protecting me? So if someone says, in one of my boundary classes, someone said to me, "Can you help me with this boundary? I need to get my husband to, or my ex-husband to." And I was like, "Stop. That's not a boundary.
Mhm.
You're trying to control his behavior." So a boundary is protecting yourself, or controlling your personal space. So if my spouse is okay, when we were co-parenting, many times he would call and it would start out nice and it would get nasty. And so I'd say, we can either pivot, or we can pick this up later. And then I'd give him one more chance, and I'd say, I am going to hang up if you can't stop. Okay, I'm hanging up now. Click. So you can close a door, you can walk out of a room, you can hang up. If it's digital and you're getting a barrage of nasty emails or texts, the crib notes version of my program is, you don't have to join every fight that you're invited into. And if somebody, whether it's your boss or your soon to be ex, sends you an email with 12 points, but there's only one point that's important to you, you don't have to defend the other 11. Let them go, talk to the point that you want to talk to. Or if you're reading an email and you start, as I often did, nasty, berating, belittling, you can just send an email back and say, I didn't read past the first sentence. If there's something important about little Johnny and Mary that you'd like to share, feel free to send it without any commentary. Otherwise, it won't be read. And then, of course, your listener right now is going, oh my God, but then they're going to say I'm a bad parent. And yes, they are going to say that and more
And
and
more.
more and more. And so this is part of the process. And the training really works not only on the skill of boundaries, which we could probably teach in 15 minutes, but the underlying fear and stories that we all have. I had one woman say, I was raised that good girls don't blank. That was the biggest part of her work through our boundary boot camp, because it was the belief that was the obstacle that was stuck between her and the freedom that she could experience if she could work on those boundaries.
Yeah. And good for her for recognizing that, right? Because that's part of it, is that awareness as to what is the belief system or what is the story that you're telling yourself. And so that boundaries example is a beautiful example, whether you're in divorce, whether you're happily married. And, I know I have friends that have been married for years and years, but they allow those boundaries to get crossed and then they resent. And so that's a great example. And that also, when you're able to stand true to that boundary, to your point, that helps to build confidence, right? And the more that you're able to do that, the more confidence you gain. And that also helps you be able to express yourself more authentically to what is important to you.
And I would say, because I'm such a fan of breaking generational chains, if you're listening, even if you're happily married, take a look at your boundaries with your kids.
Yeah.
Because if you don't teach them boundaries, they're not going to understand them. And boundaries, in my opinion, it's like there are billions of people on the face of the earth. If we all had really healthy boundaries, we would be living on a much more peaceful planet. And so teach your children boundaries. People who say, my kid can't this, or even my pet doesn't listen to me. When you see someone who's not well disciplined, it's because the person in charge hasn't really learned the skill of boundaries. Because once you learn them, they're sweet, they're gentle, they're powerful, they allow for freedom and love and connection. That they don't diminish, they just enhance in beautiful ways.
Yeah. Wow, that's well said. I love that. And so what would be some other potential ways that, you see the trap that people fall into in divorce that can help them reclaim that confidence or even gain? Because sometimes, you're in a relationship because you allow that partner, could be male or female, that partner to be the one in charge of things, which diminishes that confidence level for you.
Yeah. So codependence and people pleasing is the root of so much behavior. So you might have a spouse who says, "Hey, hun, what do you want to have for dinner?" "I don't know. What do you want?" Do you do that all the time? Do you whatever you want? Do you just always give it up, or do you smile when you're upset because you don't want to start something? Oh, we're out, and yeah, he or she just did this thing that displeased me, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to ruin the night. You're going to ruin the night. The night's ruined. Your pieces, your inner piece is gone. Address it. I can't address it if I don't have good communication skills. I'm going to blow it up. And so, for me, when I think about someone entering divorce and people say, "Why do you work in this?" And the high conflict, Karen, what they're at their most displeasing. Why is this the audience you choose to work with? And it's like, I see someone come in and I think, oh my goodness, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever we work together, they are going to be this beautifully healed and refined version of themselves. They're going to have boundaries. They're going to have really good communication. They're going to know how to regulate their emotions. They're going to see their part. They're going to pay it forward to their children. We are breaking generational chains. We are making happy families here. This is a beautiful thing. And so there are so many little pieces that we don't even realize we're bringing to the table. And the thing about divorce is, it typically, I know yours was, I think, 3 times longer than mine was 3.5 years. the more time it is, and it sucks. I mean, divorce sucks, long divorces
Yes.
suck more, but you have all of that time where you're in this crucible, if you choose, if you're bold and courageous enough, where you're just healing and refining and healing and refining, and then you get to live the best chapter of your life because you're free and you're intentional and you're conscious and you're owning your stuff, and you're not controlling anyone anymore, and you're raising really healthy human beings. Because my kids are 25 and 28. If I had half of what they have now, if I had it before I hit 40, I would have had a different path. Like, I love how aware they are. And that was part of the silver lining to the hell that we went through.
Well, I don't disagree on that, because I will often say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Right. And that's huge when you can look back on it and look at how you as an individual have grown and become the person that you were actually meant to be. And I'm a firm believer that people come into your life, situations come into your life to teach you things, right? Or to, really help you expand and be more of who you're supposed to be, or meant to be. So yeah, I love that. I love that you shared that. Well, Karen, I am cognizant of our time here. So any other, tips that you want to share with our audience, if they're beginning that journey, what would be the most important thing for them to really um, invest in themselves with?
Yeah. So we're in the process of creating a new free guide, which is a smart start checklist.
Okay.
So what you do when you make that decision, we talked mostly about the emotional, but it's quite the legal, financial, parenting journey. And so there, especially if you're divorcing someone who is a higher conflict individual, you want to be prepared. You want to understand your legal rights. You want to develop two support teams, only the healthy friends and family, not those who want to focus on the problem or complain about him or her. And then you want to develop whether it's a therapist or a divorce coach, a professional emotional support team to get you started. Learn your legal rights, because the minute you tell your spouse, we all do this out of fear. We talk about the nightmare that's about to happen. So prepare yourself so that you don't step on that slippery slope. And then the other thing that I would leave your listeners with is one of my favorite sayings that I learned in my healing journey. And it is that every upset is a setup.
Mm.
Every upset is a setup for you to do your personal work. And so divorce is fertile land for many, many upsets. And so you can just get upset and spiral down, or you can use it as a setup and you can spiral up and you can get healthier and more healed as you go along. So write it down, post it someplace. Every upset is a setup to remind you to stop for just a moment and say, what is in this for me?
Yeah.
In this aggravation, in this fear, in this conflict, in this fight, what in here, what is for me and not against me? And in there, you're going to find the nugget that you can work on, that you have control on, that will empower you and help you.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. So audience, just do please write that down on a sticky note, upset to set up and what's in it for me, right? Like that is fantastic. So Karen, how do people find you if they want to follow or if they have questions? Maybe somebody is, in the heat of the moment and this is really resonating. How do they find you?
So my website, my company is Journey Beyond Divorce, and we too have a podcast. I'll be having you on our podcast as well. So the podcast dates back to 2016. Almost any topic you could want, you'll find there. And jbddivorcesupport.com is our website. We have a rapid relief call, which is free. So if you're nodding your head and thinking, oh my God, I need to talk to somebody, just grab a spot on our calendar. We've got half a dozen coaches. Somebody, either myself or one of my coaches, will support you. And we also have that checklist, so you can come to our homepage and find it there as
Oh,
well.
beautiful. Okay. Terrific. Well, Karen, this has been super engaging. I wish I had found you in the beginning of my own journey. And so much of what you have shared today has really resonated. And being able to take back your power, or being empowered instead of feeling like a victim too, that is a huge step in the right direction, and even the boundaries, like, go back and re-listen to the comments that, were shared around boundaries and how that supports you no matter what the situation is. But, that is really enabling you to be in your own power. So thank you for that, beautiful insight and brilliance. We are super grateful for that. And thanks for being here on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Oh, loved it. And I want to take a moment and thank our audience. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, so we're super grateful to be listened to in over 50 countries. Please do share this episode if you have a friend that is, going through a challenging situation. You just don't know what is going to resonate. So please do share this episode with them. And if you're curious about what's happening in the WILL community, that's Women in Leadership Empowered. If you're curious about that, visit our website at willempowered.com, and you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter. We don't bombard you with lots of information. It's more about what free masterclasses are on the horizon or networking, but it'll give you a lot of insight as to how to be more empowered. So thank you again for being here today, everyone, and we wish you all the best. Take care.